Good afternoon. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. We're excited to have you here. My name is Laurel Rodriguez, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Customer Success at SureImpact. Our topic today is using data to increase your success and communicate your impact. Joining us today is Sheri Chaney Jones, founder and president of SureImpact and Measurement Resources Company. For more than 19 years, Sheri Chaney Jones has applied performance management, evaluation, and organization behavior best practices to nonprofit organizations and government agencies to help them improve outcomes and efficiencies. An author, professor, and internationally recognized expert, Sheri believes in data, metrics, and accountability. And joining Sheri is Ben Johnson, SureImpact's Director of Business Development. As SureImpact's head impact advocate, Ben helps social good leaders know the true social impact of their organizations through powerful outcome measurement, simple case management, and secure data collaboration. Just a quick note that we will try to answer any questions you submit in the Zoom panel. Feel free to submit as many as you would like. We will have time for some questions and answers towards the end of the presentation. Also, for the best viewing experience, you can click on the view icon in the top right corner of the Zoom panel and then click full screen. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Ben and Sheri.
Thanks, Laurel. If we were in person, I would have everyone give Laurel a round of applause because just love what she does and she's so good at it. And so thanks so much, Laurel, for giving that intro. Also, one point, I always love watching Sheri when Laurel is giving introductions of her accolades and her history, because if anyone knows Sheri, they know she never brings it up, but she is a wonderful leader, and we're really thankful. And I'm always excited when I get to interview you because I learn something new every single time, and I talk to you every day.
Yeah, that's good.
And so this is great. So like Laurel said, in my role, I get to talk with partners, funders, individual nonprofits. I get to talk to local leaders, local churches, pretty much any organization that is really dedicated to making an impact in their community. And so because of that, we get to learn a lot about a lot of different nonprofits, a lot about different impact-centric tactics that different organizations are taking. But we're talking to you today. And so we're going to hopefully share a lot of really great learnings and factoids and awesome insights with our attendees today. So thanks so much to you all for joining. Let's jump into it. So Sheri, you've been in this industry for 20 years. You know the people, the leaders, the qualities, the organizational research, you know a lot of these things. Even since we've talked the last time in our fireside chat, what are the biggest things that you see changing in the nonprofit industry right now?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now, like what is the hot topic today, is the labor shortage. Unfortunately, the turnover phenomenon, we're seeing it, not just in the service industry and your restaurants and local establishments, but also in nonprofits. And so we recognize that. We recognize that your organizations may be struggling with keeping staff or maintaining staff. And at the same time, though, the needs are growing. So you have maybe struggling to find and recruit staff, and then the needs in your community are growing. People need your nonprofits, whether you are a basic needs organization and you're helping people get placed into those jobs, or increase their self-sufficiency, or helping reverse the impacts of the pandemic. I mean, I think we've all suffered, regardless of socioeconomic class or problems. Right? We were all kind of dealing with the impacts of the pandemic, and so that's increasing and putting demands on the system. So we have the labor shortage, we have the growing and increasing demand, and then we have obviously the reality that has always been true. It's not any different than any other year, that we need resources to do our work. We need sustainable business models. We need those revenues to come in so we can serve and support the individual. So with those kind of the trifecta, if you will, of things that are going on, We're excited today to talk about how impact measurement actually is a cure in some ways for some of these challenges, or can help make the bridge to some of these challenges easier and better. And I'm really excited and passionate about that, because not only where does my passion come from, or why is this so exciting for me? That's a question. You didn't ask that question, but I just want to answer it because it's not just because I think this is true. It's because we have decades of research that shows that when organizations move to impact-centric cultures, they are able to retain staff. They are able to create greater impact in their communities, and they're significantly more likely to raise more money. Mm-hmm. So it's like if you're sitting there thinking, man, I'm dealing with this labor shortage and increasing needs, and I need to raise more money to work with all the people, and I need more efficient and effective ways to do it. Well, impact measurement isn't a nice to have. It's actually proven to help you be successful.
I feel like we could be done just right after that, but we'll keep going.
Yes.
So you brought up a lot of really great things. I think one thing that I like to point out, the elephant in the room, because there is one, is it sounds like there's bad news. It sounds like this is way too hard. We have big barriers to what we're trying to do, and we have huge goals. Yeah. We have communities that we're trying to help, vulnerable, marginalized people we're trying to help. How are we ever going to be able to do this? And you brought up, there's good news, is that impact measurement helps. Practically though, when you're speaking with a lot of these nonprofits, this is the question: how can you use data? This is what we want to do. We want to make 2022 the most impactful year yet. Mm-hmm. How do we use data to do that?
Yeah, and I think that's also where I get really excited, because unlike maybe in the past, with SureImpact, we have solved for so many pain points that organizations were experiencing. Some people on the call may not know that prior to founding and becoming the CEO of SureImpact, I had a 20-year career as a consultant in the government and nonprofit space. And I was helping these organizations measure their impact, like defining the impact measurement framework and what data elements that they should collect. But what we kept hearing from the field was the technology or the data structures just made it was either too expensive, it was too complicated, it required too much resources, whether from a developer or other places, to make it work for them. And so in 2018, me and my co-founder Matt, we just said no more. Like we're going to solve this problem. This problem needs to be solved, because we have to create these impact-centric organizations, because it's what's going to drive us into the future, not only to have more sustainable organizations, but also to really solve those complex social problems that we're working to solve. And so the good news is that SureImpact is now available. That takes out all the hard. That now makes it possible. It almost automates it to become a very impact-centric organization. And your staff, I mean, Ben, you're more on the lines talking to our users and people who use SureImpact, but staff love it. It makes their job so much easier. And then the leaders get the insights they need to go raise more money. And be more, I know there's a lot of talk in the field too, when you talk about trends of being human centric, and making sure that we're participatory with the beneficiaries and the clients that we serve, as we serve them, and make sure their voice and their experience is part of our program design and part of our work. Well, guess what? That's data.
Yeah.
We often don't think about that information that coming to us. That's data. That's part of being data driven, and having all those insights right there to ensure success is the good news.
Yep, it is. And even with some of the research that I've been studying and some of the nonprofits that I've been speaking to, a lot of nonprofits are kind of doing a balancing act between providing impact information to the funder for the funder's requirements, but also tracking and measuring that data so that they can be better serving the beneficiaries, the clients, the students, the children, the families. And SureImpact helps bridge that gap. Because for a long time you had to choose. Am I going to just get everything I need for the funder, or am I going to do what I need to do for the sake of the beneficiary? And for the first time, you don't have to choose anymore. You get both. So a lot of people here you can have two groups of people. I'm going to just minimize it. You might have leadership, and then you might have frontline staff, whether it's case managers or grant development people. You might have some funder staff here. How do you help? What do these people need to accomplish that transition that you made in 2018 from these are big problems to this is how we fix it? How do you help them see what they need to accomplish the types of impact-centric work around data that they want to do, they need to do?
Yeah, and that's why I like to say we took out all the hard because we deeply understood the problems. We understood the case manager's frustration from, the old model was case managers felt like all this data and reporting compliance stuff was it was burdensome. It kept them from managing their caseloads and being human-centric and really meeting the needs of their beneficiaries. And so what SureImpact does is it actually works the way a case manager works. It allows them to be more human-centric. It allows them to quickly see inside that person's record, everything that they've experienced, everything that they've done, so you can deliver better services. And it makes it actually rewarding instead of like this like paperwork burden, because you get immediate feedback. We all love instant gratification, and SureImpact gives you that in terms of like, oh, I did this and now I can see it. And now I see how I'm moving the needle and how I'm creating an impact. And that actually psychologically, that just like, we like our likes on Facebook or Instagram, that gives us dopamine. So it's actually a rewarding tool. So that's kind of on that case manager, saving time, keeping them engaged and being able to be more client-centric. From the grant reporter, evaluator, fundraiser perspective, you no longer have to have that tension that we find all the time in nonprofit offices where, the grants team or the grant writer or the executive director has a grant due and it's due like tomorrow because you just figured it out. But you're perfect for it. So what do? You like run over to the program team and you're like begging the program team for data. And they're like, I have 8,000 things to do. And we just lost 2 staff. And so there's that tension and they might not have it. They might not have a way to quickly pull it. Well, we eliminate that problem because the grant writers just log right in and boom, there's the data you need to write the report in less than 5 minutes or so. You've got an amazing impact statement with real data. No longer are you making stuff up. It's real. And then from the executive directors, we were talking to an executive director last week, and it was so fun to see her like face light up when she saw that she could be in a board meeting, pull up her SureImpact dashboard and just toggle the filters and show her board what they've been doing and the results that they've been getting. And, it's game changing.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. It's just so exciting and game changing.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are starting to understand that. You have these conversations where the light switch turns on and you're like, yes, you're coming to where we are at right now. This would be a kind of a good question for maybe those who the light switch hasn't gone off yet.
Yeah.
How would you advise or come to them and give them insight of where do they even start?
Yeah.
Because that's a lot of times you will talk to the executive directors and they're really excited about what they can get from it. But then they have to figure out how do we go from where we're at today to starting down this path of being impact-centric, human-centric, and data-driven.
Well, I think the simplicity of SureImpact is what makes it so, to use impactful, I shouldn't use that word again, but just it makes it so adaptable to an organization because unlike other platforms on the market that you may experience, there's a long, and not with SureImpact, but with others, there's a long and lengthy and expensive implementation process. So you may have in the past felt that overwhelm of, I have to build out all these requirements and I have to know everything I want because I'm going to have to pay this person to do the implementation and make it perfect for us. Guess what? That's not the case with SureImpact. You can get started with how you are today. I mean, just boom, you sign on. Now you have your login and you can create your demographic fields to be exactly how your forms are today. We actually start with TANF application requirements. So those are already there for you. And if that's all you want to start tracking is just what are you doing with your beneficiaries and kind of their basic demographics, you can start there. And we have a measures library built into the platform. So if you're not sure where to start, well, we give you the best practices right there, and you can just decide, yes, that's something we're interested in tracking, or that's something. As you evolve, as you bring on new programs, or as you decide you want to track different measures, or you have a new funder who's asking you to track something different, guess what? You just make the change right there. Again, no extra fees, no extra development. It's there for you. And it works the way your nonprofit.
Yeah. And I mean, along those lines, what I've seen when I've been talking with nonprofits that are trying to do this is they might go down the road with a software company that is wanting to do this with them.
Mm-hmm.
And the first step that they have to do is sit down and train this person what nonprofit programs look like,
mm-hmm.
and how the nonprofit industry works and how their staff work. And they have to pretty much educate this individual or this group before they can even start any work.
Yeah.
And they get to this point during that process where they're like, I wish a nonprofit person would just build something like this.
Yeah.
And that's what you did.
Yeah.
You were a nonprofit person that was racking your brain and having to do all of that pre-work before you could do the real work.
Mm-hmm.
And then you made SureImpact.
Yes.
One of the best things about SureImpact is the model that you have implemented using the 3 types of data
mm-hmm.
that you need to analyze.
Yeah.
I know that many of the attendees here might have heard something like this in the past, but could you go over what
mm-hmm.
those 3 types of data that are necessary for impact-centric reporting and
mm-hmm.
communication?
Yeah. And I think, obviously we recognize that many of you signed up for this webinar because that's exactly what you want to know, right? I want to be more impact-centric. I want to create an impact statement to be able to go tell my funders and put in my annual reports. How do I do that? And what I tell everybody is, well, to do that, you need to start thinking about what data are you collecting? And you should be collecting 3 types of data. And those 3 types of data are, what did you do and who did you do it for? So that is, your client demographics and the services that you provide to them. And then we also need to collect how well are we doing? So is it a metric of timeliness? Is it a measure of, are people successfully completing the program? Is it cultural responsiveness?
Mm-hmm.
So those types of quality measures. And then we need measures of, are people better off? Are you providing value to the beneficiaries that you serve? And how are you providing that value?
Mm-hmm.
Those mission statements everyone has on the wall, can we quantify it? Can we prove it? And the answer is yes, because, I've been doing this for 20 years. There's yet to be anything I haven't been able to quantify and measure and help nonprofits measure. And again, we put all of that learning and best practices right there in SureImpact. And one thing that people, I think, obviously nonprofit leaders came into the space because they want to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be very clear. You didn't want to be data scientists. And I don't want you to be a data scientist either. I actually just want you to get to the insights you need to be better nonprofit leaders and nonprofit professionals. And so that's what, kind of SureImpact's thesis or premise is that let's drive them to the insights they need to be better and more high performing nonprofit leaders. So we structure the data, and now I'm getting really geeky, Ben, I know, but it's kind of like if I want to be a healthy person and I go see a doctor, the doctor knows all that medical stuff.
Yeah.
I have to trust that all the science and research that went into that is good. So just trust this. But anyway, the data structure, the data model is modeled the way it needs to be, where it aligns what did you do, how well did you do, and how are people better off, so that you can start to look at I'm so excited because we've been working with this client and we just recently learned that the average number of hours someone spends with their coaches is significantly correlated with improvement scores and housing stability.
That's huge.
So now they're able to take that to their funders and say, we know now, we have kind of this proven, not just a proven model, but a scientifically proven model that if we can serve people by, and make sure that they get to 6 hours of services with our coach, they're going to have housing stability. That's a game changer, isn't it?
Yeah. And in order to get that extra funding, you have to be able to say, I can prove that we need more people, so we can spend more hours with our clients to get these outcomes.
Yeah.
And it's if you don't have that data, making that proof is impossible. You can say, well, we know it works like this. Forever we've been saying, we know it works like this. We know it works like this. Now we can say, we actually can prove it.
Yeah.
Here's the proof.
So it's not just like there's one, and maybe it's a subtle distinction, but I think it's a huge distinction, is, sometimes you can say, well, we saw 68% improvements in our clients. It's another thing to say, but we know for that 68% who were successful, why? And SureImpact is helping you get to the why. Why are people successful? Why are they not successful? What is that relationship? Making sure you have equal outcomes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so important that we're not like, when we don't have the data in the data model, I'm not going to spend too much time on the data model, but when we don't, if the data is not structured in the right way, we can't answer the questions that we want to answer. And so we were very, very intentional to make sure that we were empowering, equipping nonprofits to be able to answer those important research questions to drive social change.
Yep. And that's really what we're doing in the industry, is doing that. And they use different terms. So two big terms in the world right now are equity and equality. Without people knowing it, that's a relative term to data. And that's the only way we know about equality or equity, is if we evaluate that using data. And so, like you said, not everyone has to be a data scientist, and that's not what you're calling for. But we do have to start transitioning the cultures in our organizations to be data-driven cultures. How does SureImpact facilitate that shift, where it's not just the executive director, it's not just the program director, it's not just the staff, but everybody holistically to be data-driven in their culture?
Yes. Yeah. Well, first we make, again, I'm going to say this again because I love it, that we take out the hard and just make it easy. Because data can have a big, scary kind of, it can feel scary or big or sterile, but in reality, it's just information. It's just insights. That's truly what data are. And so what SureImpact does is, again, I mentioned it's the feedback loops. The staff have feedback loops about their own work. The executive directors have the feedback loops about their own work. It gives us a standard way to talk about what we're doing, right? So just think about in your staff meetings, if you pulled up, quarterly, you pull up your SureImpact dashboard and you start to talk about like, hey, and celebrate the success. Like, look how we've changed, these people's lives, and then start having performance improvement conversations around, how can we, let's say, that 6 hours is like the magic number. And if you can get people 6 hours of coaching, that translates into improved housing outcomes. And you can look at, well, how many average services have we done this month? Well, what's getting in our way? Why do we keep stopping at 3? How do we get to 6? Like, that's an impact organization. That's a data-driven organization. Like, I want people to understand that data is just a means to an end, and it's about what you do with it and the conversations you have with it, and breaking out of this, like, data is like something we have to do. To know it's such a fun, obviously I'm really excited about it. I love it, but it's because it's what it allows us to do. It's how we are going to change the world. We cannot just blindly go about our world thinking something's going to work. It's having that information to know it will.
And to your point, how do we get to 6 might be, we have to find 2 hours extra. And you know what a lot of our clients have said? SureImpact cuts 2 hours of reporting out of their day. And so that's an easy way to say we're the difference between us meeting these outcomes and not is SureImpact. Maybe.
That's, I absolutely love hearing that SureImpact is saving people 2 hours a day. Like,
and this is case managers. This is not just reporting people. This is case managers.
Where they get to go do what they love.
Exactly.
Which is serving people.
Exactly. Spend those 2 more hours making a difference, making an impact. So here's a question for those here, either that they're getting to the place where they have the data necessary, or they're like, well, in order to convince my executive director, I have to be able to say, what is this going to do for us? And we've talked about kind of the fiscal benefits. We've talked about some of the time saving benefits, but a lot of times in order to know the true benefit, you have to be able to communicate impact effectively. What are some tips that you have for our attendees to effectively communicate impact once they have the data?
Sure. So there's a lot of insights that SureImpact delivers that you have right there at your fingertips, calculated for you. Of course, your success rate and how well. So I would say, in order to talk about impact, we need three types of information. We first need clearly defined outcomes. So we already talked about how SureImpact has all those built in for you if you don't have any of yourself. So clearly defined outcome, you need to know your success rate on those. So how many people successfully achieve those outcomes? Again, it's calculated right there for you. You don't even have to do math. And then you need to know how much your program costs. Because when you know how much your program costs and you know what your success rate is, now you can talk about what does that cost per success. So when you go to a funder or when you go to even your boss, like think about going to your executive director and saying, do you know that it costs us $1,500 to get one youth to fully functioning? And they'll be like, really? Yeah, that's what it costs. So it changes the way we talk about budgeting, right? We can now talk about what does it take to get to an outcome, and be realistic about that, because if not, we might be underfunding ourselves and we don't know why we can't get to the results that we want. It's because we don't really know what it takes. Yeah. And so SureImpact gives you that data to say, this is our success. This is how much it costs to get to our success. If we were to raise X more dollars, guess what? We could create X more impact. Like you just, I don't know.
No,
it makes me so excited.
It's an exciting thing because it's a little bit counter to what's been done in the past. Where in the past, organizations would do cost per client. And that's just to get through the program. Yep. So from entrance to exit, this is how much it costs to serve that client. But like you said, there was this gap in why aren't we meeting our impact goals? Or why is it costing more than we think? And it's because they didn't know how to say, using metrics, using data, using information to just bring it down to simplicity. What does a successful client look like at exit? Is it someone who just finishes or someone who is better off in XYZ ways? Does this person now have stable housing when at the beginning they were in vulnerable housing, of subsidized housing? Does this family have all of their kids going to school and attending school full time when at the beginning, maybe only some of them were attending school some of the time and having behavior problems? We want to be able to say the successful client is one that has these things that they're better at now. And that's really what we mean by impact is how are people better off? It's not just how much money are we investing into the community, but how much money are we investing into the community that makes these outcomes a reality? And so you can actually say to a funder, especially not only to your executive director, but to a funder, hey, it takes $1,500 to get a youth successfully through a program. And let me show you the proof of that. So funders now can get excited about whether their focus is being good stewards of endowment or whether their focus is, we have corporate partners that are asking for these equality, equity issues to be addressed. And we can say, this is how we're addressing it. And that's the great thing about SureImpact is you're not only able to understand your impact with these metrics on an aggregate general level for all your clients and students and residents and families, but you're actually able to filter down to a specific ethnicity. You're able to filter down to a specific gender. These are things that our funders want to know. And if the funders can't see that with what the data that they have right away, they have to look for better data. And they're going to start asking for that information. So better to be able to say, yep, got it right now. Click of a button. It doesn't take me 2 weeks to dig into all our data, and I have to become a data scientist to be able to tell my story well. It is exciting. It's changing. Do you want to say something?
No, I'm ready. I can't wait for the next question.
So this one is for you out there that love practical tips. This is how would you personally integrate both a story, so this is more like a narrative, but then data also into an annual appeal letter.
Yes. So I think this is a great question. I think especially as we're moving into Giving Tuesday season and the big end of year campaign and appeal season, by no means do I want to send the message that we don't need to add stories and emotion, into our appeals. But where SureImpact kind of helps with that story is that one, it will actually allow you to track testimonials. So if you, if one of your case managers has great outcomes in one of your beneficiaries and they're willing to share their story, you can type that up there, right there in SureImpact. So the grant writer could find it really quickly if they needed it. But also how you mix the both, if you will, is that I always recommend that you have a great image. So it starts with a nice image. And it also then is the narrative. What was that transformation for that one individual, right? And once you have that transformation, now below it, you add, and, let's say you're talking about a woman with 3 children who came through your training program and now is working her dream job and is self-sufficient. That's kind of, let's say that's her wonderful story. And she's willing to tell it and she shares that. Then you can say, and 65% of our clients are females with children with this need. So now I know, okay, it's not just this one individual you serve with success. You actually have a lot of people that look like her and have similar success. And 85% of them also got jobs at a self-sufficient wage this year. And so now when we know about how people buy, right? People buy with emotion, but they rationalize their decision with their brains. And so that's how we put it all together. And you may be sitting here and maybe the question's already in the chat, but people have asked me this before, like, how do we make sure that we aren't, stigmatizing or, and we do not want to exploit people's stories. And so I think that's where that participatory evaluation, that human-centric process is so important, because SureImpact allows you to be partners with your clients in making sure that you're delivering services in a way that honors them. And it's it's almost running your nonprofit like a for-profit business runs, because I know that is kind of a controversial statement, but let me explain a little more, is around, in a for-profit business model, you have to be very, very, very in tune to your customers' wants, desires, wishes, right? Because if you don't, you likely won't resonate with them.
You'll go out of business.
Yeah, you'll go out of business. And so I welcome that this is a push in the field to get to impact. We also have to be very in tune to our beneficiaries' desires, needs, and wishes. And having that kind of insight and data will actually drive outcomes faster than if we don't have them. So that will help you communicate to your funders what truly do your clients, customers, what do they need to achieve real change. And that's another kind of feedback loop or information you can use to tell your impact story as well.
And I like that. It's kind of controversial, that statement. But I like it because when you're focused on outcomes, it actually benefits the beneficiary even more, because you're not just focused about them completing the program. You are focused on outcomes. How do I make this person's life better? And when you're focused on just completing a program, they might feel rushed sometimes, and you're like pushing them through. Where if you're like, no, my goal is for you to be better off in these specific ways. You can have those conversations, and then help your clients, your beneficiaries, start to realize, oh, I was here and now I'm here. And that's that dopamine that you're talking about to those beneficiaries. You're helping them see, I came all this way. Where if you can't keep track of that, sometimes you can have anecdotal evidence of, hey, Miss or ma'am or Mr., like, this is how you've like grown in this way. You can actually say like, hey, at the beginning, you were in vulnerable state with your housing, or you were subsidized housing, and now you have a mortgage and you've paid it on time for 6 months. That's a great story that you can look back on and help your beneficiaries and your clients set goals for themselves and have those conversations. So that's that human-centric buy-in where you can help clients actually take responsibility for the outcomes that are in their lives. That's huge.
And making sure that the outcomes that you are setting forth for your organization are actually the same results that your beneficiaries want. Like, and if that's not the case, let's figure out why and how do we get on the same page. So anyway,
that's really good.
So exciting stuff.
I mean, So 2 questions. First question is kind of more, how do we bring this to our teams? For the attendees here, they're getting all this information and then they may go back and be like, I'm so excited, but how do I pitch this to my executive director? Or how do I start this conversation with my program director? Or if it's an executive director, how do I bring this before my board and tell them this is what we need for our nonprofit? What would be some tips of what they could maybe say to their teams or to their leadership that could help spark a conversation?
Sure. Well, first I want to say we want to help you. So don't be afraid to reach out to Ben or I to actually help you with that pitch or give you the materials you need to have that conversation. But I think that if you are passionate about creating impact-centric organizations, you know that it'll create more efficiency in your organization. You'll get the data you need to tell a better story to your funders, which will attract more funding to your organization. Like, I feel like the fact that there is a product out there that's going to make everyone's lives easier and better, save time and money, and generate revenue, that's a win-win. So I think that that's kind of the starting point. Hey, I have an idea that I've been researching some things. I've been learning a lot of things about impact measurement. And I have an idea where we can help our organization better tell our story, be more efficient and effective, have the insights you need, executive director, to talk to your board and to go fundraise. Let's learn more.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, just going with that as well, you can probably foresee or forecast some of the questions that your leadership might ask. I mean, these people know their teams best. And so they know what's helpful, what's not helpful. But sometimes what happens is they go back with a great idea. Someone asks them or berates them with a bunch of questions and they're like, I don't know. And I'm just not going to say anything anymore. And they kind of stop it at that. But like Sheri said, we would encourage you to come and talk with us. And so we can at least help you with that conversation. If you have questions for us, or if you're like, hey, I know my boss or my board is going to ask me these questions. What is a good response? And we'd love to give you information, if it's about SureImpact or if it's about taking this first step towards impact-centric organizational styles. And we'll help in both of those areas. All right, last question, and then we're going to dive into some questions.
Okay.
This is the magic one too. Why now? Why do we have to make this change now? Why is everyone talking about it? Why is this big exciting thing? What makes impact-centric, human-centric change urgent?
Yeah. Well, I think that why now, there's a lot of why nows, like why now in November, why now, in this point in time in history. But let me be very specific and say, why now in November?
Okay.
Because we have 2022 is just around the corner. And you think about how we normally tell our story is in annual reports. And how do we get a robust annual report? Have 12 months of data, have a full year's worth of data. So if you say yes to an impact-centric 2022, which I hope all of you are saying yes to, because of what it can do for your beneficiaries and your communities and your teams, then you've got to get started in the end of this year. So you get 12 months of data. So that's the why November? Why now? Why this time in history is because when we know better, we do better. I mean, that's kind of that old thing. And now we know better. We have better technology. We have a lot of case studies of how organizations have been able to use data to truly solve very, very complex social problems, and then take that and scale it and create an even greater impact in the world. And without that data, it's very, very hard to do that. So stop waiting around when here's the solution. And, research also shows that organizations with outcomes and impact data are 68% more likely to raise more money. So I know you all want more resources in your organizations. I don't know. There's probably so many other reasons. Ben, what are your reasons?
No, I know this is ominous and I don't mean it to be, but just like financial audits are a part of our day-to-day lives for-profit and nonprofit organizations, impact audits are going to be more of a daily part of our conversations. From funders, from government agencies, these are things that are going to happen where before aggregate reporting might have worked, where we're serving this many unique clients and we've spent this many hours and we've spent this much money on each program. For a lot of times that worked, but now what is starting to be requested from these funders, and some of them already right now, just as part of the grant contract or the grant proposal or application, is, hey, you have to give us individual reporting on the impact that you make on your clients in order to get this grant. It's going to start being a lot more complex. And that's even with social investing coming into play, where individual donors are starting to become more intelligent of who is making the biggest impact on the groups of people that I care about most. And so for individuals even that care about racial equity and inclusion, they are going to start looking for nonprofits that don't just have it on their website saying we care about these things, but they're going to start looking for nonprofits that they can say numbers. How many in this group of people are you serving? How effective are you with this group of people? And then they'll make their decision to donate on that information. And you have to have that ready. You can't tell an individual donor, hey, come back tomorrow and I'll give you that information. They make their decisions really quickly, and they're using the internet to do so. And so that's kind of my last thing of why now is, just like you said, in order to get it done and to have the most impactful 2022 of any year that any of the nonprofits ever had, they have to start making these changes now. Because a lot of there's a lot of bureaucracy in the nonprofit world. And so in order to make changes actually implemented in time, you have to start as soon as possible. And that doesn't mean calling us right now. It might be calling us as soon as this ends, but it might be doing some research, sending an email, to us, scheduling a meeting.
Schedule a demo.
Schedule a demo. If you haven't seen SureImpact, there literally is no damage in saying, what are they talking about? How do they actually make this work? There's no pressure. I think that there's they started this trend back in the day. Anytime you applied for a mortgage or anything, they put no pressure, no guarantees, no contract involved yet. And that's the same thing here. Is there's no pressure or commitment in just seeing a demo. And it's a great use of your time, especially if you're looking to make some sort of change towards an impact-centric organization, and you want to see how other nonprofits are doing it. We'd be happy.
It'll inspire you.
Inspires me.
And we've got, especially, I think another thing you talked about, how do I take this back to my team? We know that the end in mind is always a very good strategy. And so we're really excited now that we have some example we know we can show you the dashboards and how those work, but then we can also show you what could be the end product. How could you take that information and package it in a way that could get people excited as well. So it might inspire you for what could be possible for your organization to tell your story better.
Well, this has been awesome. I know we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. And so, Laurel, I'm going to toss it over to you to hear kind of what questions our attendees have had, and we'll do our best to answer them.
All right. Well, thanks to both of you. So We do have a few questions. So the first one, so it says, we use Google Sheets, but my boss doesn't want to deal with change. How do I convince her Google Sheets is not an effective way to measure impact and it's worth taking the time to change?
Oh, okay. Well, first, let me start with security. Google's great, but I would be very concerned if I had private identifying information sitting around in a Google Drive. That could be emailed. You never know if someone's going to go in there and take it and email it. That's like, we're right there. I'm like, security. One, if you had everything, all that information in SureImpact, it'd be HIPAA protected. It'd be, it'd be secure. The data would be secure. Business continuity is another one. You want to make sure that your data is in a place that if maybe someone understands how to read those Google Sheets or how those work. But if that person leaves the organization, and we see lots of turnover right now, will you be stuck? Will it be like, just that person knew how to read those Google Sheets or how to analyze those Google Sheets? So going into the cloud, going to a secure place provides that business continuity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another really important reason. And then it's also, I would want to ask the questions because I'm a researcher. And so my question would be, how are the people who are entering the data into the Google Sheets or managing those Google Sheets, how useful are those sheets to them? Like, are staff seeing that process is actually a benefit to them, or is it a burden? And, really explore that, because again, there's a lot of benefits that SureImpact provides that actually increases staff morale. Mm-hmm. It increases their satisfaction with their work. And see if there is, because I don't know, I work in a lot of spreadsheets. There's not a whole lot of reward often when you just type data in a spreadsheet. And then another thing is, how much time are you spending managing those Google Sheets to get your boss or leader the insights that you need? And then how quickly does your manager or boss or executive director have access to that information? Mm-hmm. So those would be all the questions I just be curious, and I just start to ask all these questions.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where we're going with these, is the answer to a lot of those questions are pointing to, it's not an effective use of resources.
Yeah.
You use this example, and it just cracks me up every single time. But the free puppies example, tell them about the free puppies.
Sure. So, you think about a product like Google Sheets and it's free. Okay. Well, it's free, like free puppies. Think about that. You can take your kids to a garage sale, and there's these puppy litter that has just been, born, and the free puppy sign is there, and you are like, oh, okay, I'll take that. Well, how free is that really, right? You now have the cost of the veterinary shots and the kennel and the bedding and the food and the ongoing vet bills and, the kennels and the boarding and all of that information. So there's a cost involved, and there's a cost involved to Google Sheets too. Mm-hmm. And so really understanding what is that time cost? What is the efficiency cost? What is the lack of insights that you're getting quickly? What does that cost your organization? There's a lot of costs there that may feel hidden.
Yeah.
But bringing those out and really understanding how inefficient some of those manual processes really are.
Yeah. And I think with the free puppy example, I think a lot of executive directors don't just like looking at rows and columns. Mm-hmm. And no one likes looking at rows and columns. I kind of do, because I'm a data nerd. Mm-hmm. But not many people like looking at rows and columns. They want insights. Yep. When I was working in the marketing world, the White House, for example, it has like a $15 billion contract with the organization I worked with to give a summarized insight 1 page on the desk of the president every single day. So leaders pay for insight. They don't pay just for data. And so that's where I think we love data, and we
Mhm.
realize impact data is super important. But impact data is super important because impact insights are
Mhm.
super important.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say with the Google Sheets. Are you getting just the data you need, or are you also getting the insights you need? And SureImpact provides a great way to track all that data, but then also gives the insights you need at a click of a button, rather than you having to scramble and do all that extra work.
Yeah. And I'd probably want to do an audit on your Google Sheets just to make sure you're collecting all the right data in the right way
Yeah.
to really answer the right research
And that
questions.
no one's editing the sheets. Or
Yeah. Or
copying and pasting and-
the corruption that can happen. Like,
Yeah.
we had a whole, that's another story. But anyway, we did have a client who was managing things in Excel, similar to Google Sheets, on a shared drive, and lost, I think, 1,500 records.
Oh boy.
So that made SureImpact decision like that, because
Yeah.
that won't happen.
Nope. I know that was
All
a
right.
long answer to your question, but Laurel, keep going.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you for that. So the next thing I wanted to ask about is, so you have mentioned equity earlier, and kind of needing data to be able to view equity. So how does someone even get started viewing equity or viewing data with an equity lens?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think the first thing you have to do to view data through an equity lens, it is to commit to tracking some basic demographics on who you serve, and making sure that you can tie like who the person was and what their outcomes are. And of course, that's very sensitive and private data. And so that's why having a secure system is so important, that has all the securities in place. So although you may be able to see that females have the same outcomes as males, or minority populations have the same outcomes as majority populations, but that's sensitive information. So you want it you need it tied. You need that person and their outcomes tied together, but you also need to protect their identity and protect that information. And so I think that's why SureImpact is such a valuable platform, because it provides that protection, but it gives you back to those insights,
Mhm.
and it allows you to compare outcomes by different groups. And once we start to do equitable research and look at outcomes by population groups, it's so empowering, because we see there's so much disparity in the world. And the only way what we focus on grows.
Mhm.
And so the only way that we can get around it or get above it is, one, to know our baseline.
Mhm.
And it's sometimes painful. It's sometimes very painful to see some of these disparities right there in front of us, but we have to know them in order to change them.
Yeah. And that's, just practically how SureImpact helps that is, you're also able to not only look at outcomes per ethnicity or gender, but also time spent with the ethnicity or gender. And SureImpact lets you do it with one quick click of a button.
Yeah.
So you can see these are the services that we did for this group, and how much each we did with that. And then you can start doing averages and start comparing that to, okay, are we focusing too much in this area? Are we lacking focus and lacking intentional service to this group? And if that's the case, like you said, we got to look in the mirror and say, it's time to change.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you can do it. If you don't have that data, you don't know what needs to change.
And it goes back to the why. Like, why are these results happening? And if you learn that, we said, earlier, we were just picking on that 6 hours of coaching, but if 6 hours of coaching is our proven trigger that gets us to a positive outcome, and we're learning that for different population groups, we're only getting 3 hours of the 6. Well, now we're peeling back the onion to really drive change and say, well, what are the barriers? Well, maybe our services aren't offered in the neighborhoods that those individuals reside. And so there's a huge access barrier to get to our services. Like, do you see how it's really, we're talking about data and impact, but it's so much more than that. It's about really creating change.
All right. Well, that is all the time that we have today. So thank you both thank you everyone for your questions, and for Ben and Sheri for your comments today. So We appreciate everyone tuning in today. We will be reaching out to make sure all of your questions got answered. We would love to invite you to meet with us for a readiness assessment to see how you can start measuring impact and also how to make 2022 your most impactful year. We will be sending out the recording in the next few days. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you at future events.